It all kicks off in a chaotic world where terrifying monsters, like this red dragon, are destroying everything. These creatures are the enemies of humanity, and their only goal is to attack people and wipe out civilization. Faced with this constant threat, those who wish to fight the monsters must choose one of two paths. The first path is that of the mage, who uses the mana that flows throughout the atmosphere to cast spells. In this way, they can perform supernatural miracles and create magic with immense destructive power. Right after, we see the mage in action, launching several blades of energy against the flying creature. The gigantic beast is not a fan of this and roars in fury upon being hit by the magical attacks. Although the spell looks powerful, it explodes without causing much real damage to the colossal monster. With that, the mages on the ground start to panic when they realize their strongest magic didn't work. The winged creature seizes the opportunity and dives swiftly toward a warrior who was on the ground. From there, we're introduced to the second path, that of the swordsman who refines their own energy to fight. But even with his superhuman technique, the warrior's sword shatters upon hitting the dragon's scales. He's completely shocked, as a person can only dedicate themselves to one of these two fighting paths. And so, the dragon prepares for a devastating counterattack, gathering flames in its mouth. Because of this, the creature unleashes a massive fiery explosion that engulfs the entire area around it. Faced with the situation, the common warriors fall into despair, crushed by their own helplessness. But amidst the chaos, a mysterious figure suddenly appears to protect everyone. This lone man prepares to face not just one, but multiple enemies on the horizon. Right after, he bravely leaps toward the red dragon that seemed invincible. The colossal creature is visibly surprised by the audacity of the human who came to challenge it. And in the reflection of the monster's eye, we see the swordsman ready to end it all in a single blow. In an instant, the battle is over, and the shadow of the defeated dragon falls over the hero. With that, the other survivors are left completely shocked by the display of power. Thus, he proves that those who master their path can become true heroes. This man is Oscar, the legendary sword saint, the strongest among all warriors. The people who were saved thank him profusely for showing up to rescue them from danger. Faced with the situation, Oscar simply tells them to handle the rest and turns to leave. His cold attitude leaves everyone confused, not understanding why the hero is leaving so soon. As he walks, our protagonist reflects on having chosen the path of the sword and not of magic. And as a swordsman, he trained relentlessly until he reached the highest rank, that of sword saint. Meanwhile, Oscar observes a man showing a little magic trick to a young girl. This scene leaves him thoughtful, as he has always found magic to be something incredibly beautiful and fascinating. He knows he has become a person admired by all because of his strength with the sword. The children look at him with the same admiration he once felt for magic users, and even with all the recognition he's achieved, something still bothers him deep down. That old desire he had for magic since childhood still exists within him to this day. From there, the scene shifts to a mountainous area where Oscar is preparing for his daily training. Our protagonist then begins to swing his wooden sword with superhuman strength. Some distance away, two of his apprentices carefully watch their master's training. A girl asks if he trains every day, and the young man confirms, saying that the ground there used to be flat. The swordsman continues his intense training, moving with agility across the terrain. The apprentice explains that Oscar's constant training has sunk the ground, creating that crater. Our protagonist remains completely focused on his movements, not noticing his students' gazes. The girl is completely floored, finding it impossible that someone could create a crater just by training. Suddenly, the apprentice remembers the scroll in her hands, and the young man asks what it is. The training is interrupted when his apprentice suddenly calls out to him, needing to speak with him. With that, she runs toward him, waving a letter and saying it came from the imperial capital. As Oscar reads the message, the girl asks worriedly if it's bad news. He replies dismissively that it's a medal for subjugating the dragon and complains about the hassle. The apprentice finds it amusing and says he could get an important position with his achievements. Our protagonist shoots down the idea, stating he has no interest in politics and would rather train. With a smile, the girl comments that he really seems to love the way of the sword. Oscar falls silent for a moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. With a distant look, he reveals that he doesn't actually particularly like the sword. He then confesses that he only chose this path because his father, a sword master, forced him to. The revelation catches the student completely off guard, leaving her speechless. Oscar confirms that he didn't follow the path of the sword by his own will, but because he was forced. The girl then says she envies him, as he possesses a natural talent for the sword. She reveals she joined the academy by choice, but now fears she might not have the talent for it. Because of this, she worries and sometimes thinks she should have become a mage. It's explained that both mages and swordsmen use circuits in their bodies to channel power. However, these two forces are opposites, and trying to mix them would be extremely dangerous. Because of this, if someone tries to use the wrong power in a circuit, the person's body collapses. The apprentice understands that this is why the choice of a path ends up defining someone's entire life. Faced with the situation, Oscar touches her shoulder in a gesture of encouragement to cheer her up. He advises her to use her time to train instead of worrying, as that's how he grew stronger. The master's words fill her with determination, and she responds with a smile and a cheerful highs. Later that night, our protagonist is lying in his bed, unable to sleep. He reflects on what he said, but admits to himself that he's not the best person to give that advice. His students' comment about him having a natural talent for the sword seems to have deeply affected him. With that, he looks at his own hand and wonders what his talent would have been like if he had chosen magic. The swordsman then laughs ironically at his own advice about not having time to worry. But suddenly, his eyes widen as he senses that something is very wrong happening outside. In that same instant, a huge explosion occurs right nearby, shattering the silence of the night. Outside, a group of mysterious figures watches the building burn from a distance. The group's leader points his staff with a sinister smile, preparing for the attack. One of the henchmen asks if they got him, but the other warns him not to let his guard down. But to everyone's surprise, our protagonist leaps from the flames without a single scratch. Landing with agility, he realizes the invaders are mages, and they seem to be very skilled. His focus shifts to the man in the center, deducing that he must be the group's leader. Following the order, the other hooded mages prepare to cast a joint spell. Our protagonist doesn't waste any time and prepares for combat, drawing his sword. With impressive speed, he dodges the energy beams coming his way, and so, he quickly advances on one of the mages to try to thin out the enemy numbers. However, in the middle of his attack, something unexpected happens and leaves him completely shocked. The leader of the mages appears holding his apprentice hostage and threatens him to surrender. The girl is gagged and utterly terrified, crying in fear from the situation. Faced with this, Oscar asks what their objective is, and the leader replies that they want his life. The swordsman is confused and says he doesn't remember doing anything to make so many enemies. With a wicked smile, the leader shows a glowing pendant and says that they came anyway. With an insane look in his eyes, the leader of the mages says they cannot forgive the existence of someone with so much talent. Our protagonist doesn't understand a thing and asks what the heck the hooded guy is talking about. But the mage just says that he doesn't need to know anything, because he's going to meet his end right there. Faced with the imminent threat, the swordsman seems downcast by the situation. The apprentice shouts for him not to worry about her, saying she's also a swordsman and is ready for anything. The girl's brave words seem to light a fire in the master's eyes. With a confident smile, our protagonist raises his sword and agrees with his student's determination. The leader of the mages is completely surprised by the sudden change in attitude. Oscar then warns that their plan has failed, because underestimating his disciple was a huge mistake. The mage holding her gets furious at the provocation and prepares to act. At the same time, the leader's ice spell is fired and flies toward our protagonist. Dozens of ice spears rain down from the sky, ready to completely pierce the swordsman. The leader of the invaders just watches from afar, believing that victory is already guaranteed. But his victorious smirk vanishes when he notices something unbelievable and says that it's impossible. It turns out that Oscar ignored his own safety to save his student, and ran the henchman through with his sword. Riddled with ice, our protagonist glares at the leader of the mages, who thinks he's an incomprehensible madman. With the student now free, the mage says the objective has been met and simply bids farewell, abandoning the scene. But before disappearing, he leaves a mysterious message about Oscar being blessed with a talent for magic. Right after, the girl runs to her master and desperately asks why he saved her like that. Even though he's all messed up, the swordsman smiles and replies that he did it because he's a warrior, too. He states with tears in his eyes that he was prepared to perish, accepting his fate. The apprentice blames herself for the situation, but Oscar comforts her, saying it's not her fault. Despite her master's words, the girl can't stop crying in despair. Meanwhile, our protagonist's life slowly begins to slip away from his body. In that moment, he remembers magic and thinks that if he were a mage, he could have done something different. With his last breaths, the swordsman's consciousness begins to fade completely. He then admits to himself that his true desire was always to be able to use magic. The hero reveals that he used the sword only to distract himself from the truth, and that the honors never fulfilled him, because nothing compared to the thrill he felt when he saw magic for the first time as a child. And with that last thought, a new light appears, as if offering a second chance. Suddenly, our protagonist opens his eyes and finds himself in the middle of a very familiar forest. With that, he's completely confused because he's sure he should be gone by now. Looking around, the young man tries to understand what's happening and where he could be. From there, he realizes he's on top of a hill overlooking his old hometown. His mind takes him back to his last moments of life, all pierced by ice. But when he comes to, he notices a wooden sword and some letters scattered on the ground. Astonishment takes over his face as he recognizes those objects from a long time ago. In his hands are the admission invitations for the 2 largest academies in the kingdom. These letters are sent to all young people around 15 years old to choose their future. Thus, they must decide between the Academy of Magic or the Academy of Swordsmen. Our protagonist kneels on the ground and sees the reflection of his much younger body. Faced with the situation, he wonders if he somehow managed to go back to the past. He has returned to when he was 14 years old, before being forced to become a swordsman. At that moment, a huge shadow appears behind him, and a very serious voice interrupts him. Right after, his father appears, asking what he's doing there and calling him by his name. Our protagonist is completely shocked to see his father in front of him after so long. With this, he realizes that if he really has gone back in time, his father is also alive. The older man scolds him, saying he's been getting cocky with his skills lately. But Oscar lowers his head and remembers what was really happening that day. He wasn't being conceited, he was wondering if he should tell his father about his love for magic. His father was a sword master and had several disciples who followed and learned from him. As such, it was natural for the young boy to also be taught the way of the sword from an early age. The boy recalls a day when he ran excitedly to his father after seeing someone use magic on the street. With a sparkle in his eyes, he told him how beautiful magic was, but his father didn't like it one bit. With a furious expression, the man yelled that magic and its users were for the weak. From then on, he ordered that as his son, Oscar should only swing his sword. The swordsman then obeyed, afraid of being abandoned, but he never forgot his true dream. Back in the present, our protagonist's face shows an unshakable determination. He tells himself that he's had enough of that kind of ending, and doesn't want to repeat it. And so, he decides that in this life, he will follow the path he always wanted, the path of magic. The sword master insists and asks why the boy is neglecting his training. With a serious look, our protagonist replies that he has faced the sword for an entire lifetime. The unexpected answer takes the older man completely by surprise, leaving him speechless. Because of this, he releases an overwhelming golden aura that manifests as energy swords. The crushing pressure sends one of the apprentices flying backward with great force. Right after, the other disciples are also knocked down by the master's display of power. However, Oscar remains completely still and calm in the midst of all that chaos. One of the students is shocked and wonders why only the master's son can remain so calm. Our protagonist faces the situation with a tranquility that only his past life could give him. At this, his father watches him with an expression of both admiration and surprise. He dispels his aura and says that it seems his son wasn't just goofing around. The boy then simply brushes the dust off his shoulder, as if nothing had happened. With pride, the father says that with this attitude, one day he might be able to entrust his guild to him. The scene leaves the other apprentices with expressions of pure envy and anger. And so, the sword master turns away, satisfied without noticing his son's true intention. As his father walks away, our protagonist just watches him with a thoughtful gaze. Suddenly, the other apprentices grab him from behind with a very strong grip. With malicious smiles, they say they were waiting for the academy break just to see him. One of them approaches and says he's going to teach him how to use a sword for real. Our protagonist then remembers that these guys were also there in his past. He recalls that they were friends with whom he used to train under his father's orders. But after they entered the academy and awakened their sword Q, everything changed. From then on, training became an excuse for them to take out their frustrations on the boy. Back in the present, the young man prepares for combat against one of the apprentices. The guy taunts him, enveloping his wooden sword with QI and telling him to get ready. Oscar reflects on how the presence of Q creates a power gap impossible to overcome with skill alone. However, he turns his back and walks toward the lake, leaving the other one confused. With a smile, the swordsman thanks them for everything and bids farewell to his old path. Our protagonist's unexpected attitude leaves the apprentice completely shocked. Without hesitation, he throws his wooden sword into the water, abandoning the life of a swordsman for good. The other apprentices call him a coward and ask if he's planning to run away. Furious, the bully calls him a disgrace and charges forward to attack him with everything he's got. But our protagonist doesn't move an inch, facing the attack head on without fear. With a smile, he says he's not going to use the sword anymore, because now he's going to become a mage. The guy doesn't care and attacks anyway, saying he won't go easy on him just for that. Oscar just watches the attack with a cold gaze, analyzing the opponent's every move. The attacker is using sword Q to increase his strength and speed in the attack. However, the blow goes right past him, and he misses the target by a long shot, leaving him completely surprised. Our protagonist explains that it won't work if he doesn't treat the sword as a part of his body. The correction leaves the bully even more irritated, his face filled with pure rage. He attacks again, but Oscar dodges all the blows with incredible ease. The hero remembers the time he spent training with his former apprentice in his past life. The apprentice becomes desperate and yells, not understanding why he can't hit him at all. With a clear opening in the enemy's guard, our protagonist prepares to end the fight. Using only his hands, he dodges and counter-attacks with a swift and precise move. With a quick and accurate strike, he knocks the apprentice down and sends his sword flying. Lying on the ground, the bully can only scream in pure rage for being defeated. Our protagonist looks down on him, not with anger, but as if he were teaching him. He questions him why he would throw away the advantage of his sword against an unarmed enemy. As the others help their fallen friend, Oscar simply turns his back and walks away. The hero believes this little lesson should be enough to keep them from bothering him anymore. With that, he remembers that in his past life, his father forced him to awaken his QI too early. To avoid the same mistake, he decides he needs to acquire magical power before anything else. With a new goal in mind, our protagonist walks through the forest in search of an isolated spot. The young man seems a bit anxious, wiping away sweat as he looks for the perfect place. Finding a well-hidden spot, he's sure that no one will be able to see him there. From there, he remembers a conversation he had with a mage in his previous life. He recalls explaining that swordsmen use internal energy and was curious about mages. The girl in the pointy hat listened to him very attentively, understanding his curiosity. Sitting in a beautiful garden, she was about to explain how magic really works. The mage then picks up a watering can to illustrate her point of view on magic. With a smile, she explains that for mages, using magic is like using a simple watering can. Our protagonist is a bit confused by the comparison and stares at her, not understanding at all. The girl says that even though you can't see it, magical power exists and fills the entire atmosphere. So, by pouring this energy into a magic formula, the spell is finally activated. Back in the present, our protagonist is sitting on a rock, trying to concentrate. He remembers what the mage once said about mana being present everywhere. With that in mind, he looks up at the sky and continues his meditation in the secluded forest. Oscar then wonders if he could pull that energy into his own circuits. The young man reflects that a swordsman uses his eyes, ears, and skin to survive. He is no longer a warrior, but his sword saint instincts are still there. Right after, the young man closes his eyes to focus all his concentration on the task. As such, he believes he will be able to feel even the invisible magical power. Faced with the situation, he begins to feel the energy in the birds and fish around him. Upon opening his eyes, he can finally see the mana as trails of light everywhere. With wide eyes, our protagonist is amazed to finally see magical power. He celebrates excitedly for having succeeded, and says that now he just needs to pull the energy inside. But the excitement quickly fades when he realizes he has no idea how to do that. Suddenly, the young man's attention is diverted to a strange noise coming from his side. From there, a small rock is thrown and lands on the ground right near where he is. Our protagonist senses that there's something very weird about that place and decides to investigate. And so, he walks carefully toward the source of the strange energy he felt. Without realizing it, the hero steps on a magic circle that was hidden on the ground. The boy finds it all very bizarre because he can't feel any signs of life nearby. In that same instant, the ground explodes, and a huge force throws him backward violently. He quickly recovers from the impact and is shocked by what emerges from the dust. Faced with the situation, a giant stone golem rises before him, ready for a fight. Oscar is left wondering why the heck a creature like that would be in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, another mysterious figure leaps from the trees and plummets rapidly from the sky. Right after, a red-haired girl lands between him and the stone monster. The mysterious girl points at him and asks what the heck he's doing in her workshop. With a threatening glare, she questions if he came for the results of her research. Our protagonist is completely speechless at the young woman's accusation. From there, she warns him to choose his next words carefully if he values his life. The young man then recalls hearing countless stories about her in his past life. That is Isabel, the Mage of Life Creation, one of the most powerful in the entire kingdom. Back in reality, he is chained up and thinks he never imagined meeting her like this. Isabel, sitting on her throne, demands to know which faction the young man belongs to immediately. Otherwise, she won't hesitate to use her power to finish him right then and there. A red magic circle activates beneath his feet, preparing to cast a spell. Seeing that things have gotten serious, our protagonist desperately asks her to wait. He tries to explain that he's not an enemy and didn't even resist when he was captured. However, Isabel doesn't seem convinced by the young man's words and grips her staff. With a furious look, she says he seems to want to perish and activates a powerful spell. The mage bids farewell to the nameless mage as our hero prepares for the worst. Desperate, our protagonist shouts that the thing is, he's not even a mage yet. The unexpected revelation leaves Isabel completely surprised and speechless for a moment. She calls him pathetic but still decides to check the young man's story. Upon touching his head, the mage's eyes widen as she realizes something unbelievable. It turns out there is absolutely no mana flowing through the boy's circuits. Sometime later, she says she now understands his situation and serves him a cup. However, the mage states with a serious look that he shouldn't expect an apology. She complains that she's barely started as a professor at the academy and has already made people hate her. Our protagonist is shocked and asks if she really works at the Magic Academy. The young woman confirms and says she thought it would be useful for her golem research. Oscar realizes this is his chance to learn from her and finally use mana. Faced with this unique opportunity, the young man looks at her with unshakable determination. With that, he pleads for her to teach him how to pull mana into his body. But Isabel refuses on the spot, saying she has no interest in weak and incompetent men. Because of this, she tells him to drink what was served and just go home. Remembering his tragic end, he tells himself that he can't give up again. With a serious expression, he faces the mage unshaken by her refusal. Isabel ignores the young man's insistence and asks her golem to refill her cup. Our protagonist observes the servant golem and is a bit intrigued by the creature. Using his sharp perception, he can see the flow of mana inside the automaton. From there, the young man notices that the circuits in the creature's shoulder are faulty. He stands up and tries to warn her that something is wrong. But the mage thinks it's just to get attention. In that same instant, the golem loses control and drops the teapot with the hot liquid. Because of this, all the scalding contents fall directly on Isabel's head. Our protagonist screams her name, completely terrified by the scene. He rushes to help her, asking if she's okay and offering a cloth to dry off. Meanwhile, the golem's shoulder continues to spark due to the defect. Soaked, she explains that the golem's right shoulder circuits got clogged. The young man then gently takes her arm to help her clean up with the cloth. At this, the mage is shocked and asks how the heck he knew the golem was going to malfunction. Our protagonist explains that the mana flow seemed strange. Stunned, Isabel asks if he can see the mana in the air, and he confirms it. He remembers the other mage saying that mana was invisible to the eye. Even so, he simply confirms to the red-haired woman that he can see it. From there, she understands how he broke her barrier that interferes with the mana in the air. The young man wonders if this is because of his experience as a swordsman. With that, he remembers the hooded mage and wonders if this was the talent he was referring to. The thought makes him a bit nervous, and he's left unsure of what to do next. Faced with the situation, Isabel stands up and says she's changed her mind on the matter. With a smile, she states that she will teach him how to channel mana as he asked. He's confused and remembers that she said she had no interest in weak men. The mage extends her hand with a smile and says that now she is interested in him. Our protagonist accepts the offer with a smile on his face, completely thrilled. And so, the two seal the deal with a firm handshake. In class, she explains that he's mistaken because mana already exists in his body. Our protagonist is confused and asks how to make the mana flow through the circuits. Isabel begins the lesson and explains that mana only flows through the circuits with a magic formula. Our protagonist is quite confused by the explanation and asks what this so-called formula is. With a smile, the mage shows a magic paper with a spell and says they give one of these at the academy. All excited, he asks what type of magic it is, but Isabel says it's a surprise for when he succeeds. She instructs him to feel the internal power and visualize it entering the formula and asks if he can do it. Full of determination, our protagonist confirms with a smile that he will do his best. The mage thinks to herself that this process would normally take at least 1 month to complete, but she continues her thought and wonders if his talent is real. Things might be different. As such, she concludes that maybe he can do it in 2 weeks while the young man prepares on the floor. Our protagonist concentrates and thinks about feeling the power circulating within himself. He realizes it's like refining his sword QI, and that he just needs to focus his consciousness inward. From there, the young man closes his eyes and enters a state of very deep concentration. In his inner world, we see his spiritual form manifesting in the midst of a dark void. Right after, a bright light appears, and the hero's silhouette breaks into a very confident smile. Back in reality, the magic paper under his hand begins to glow with an intense purple energy. Our protagonist opens his eyes and realizes that his plan is finally working. From there, an absurd amount of mana flows into the paper, enveloping it in a bright light. Right after, a visual metaphor compares learning magic to learning to walk for the first time. Faced with the situation, Isabel is left completely dumbfounded by what she has just witnessed. It's explained that the higher your rank in the world of magic, the faster you can learn. The magical energy then explodes in the sky like beautiful fireworks, illuminating everything. Still in shock, the mage begins to walk slowly toward our protagonist. She simply cannot believe that he learned to use magic on his first try. The scene flashes back to when she asked how he knew the golem was going to malfunction. The red-haired woman thinks that just seeing mana in the air shouldn't explain such great talent. But despite not understanding the reason, she realizes that one thing is absolutely certain. With that, the mage finally understands that our protagonist is a true genius of magic. The hero looks up at the sky amazed and says to himself that this is real magic. Isabel then approaches and calls out to him with a very excited shout to get his attention. As such, she congratulates him and says she's never seen a human activate a formula on the first try. Our protagonist interrupts her, saying that it wasn't good enough, and the young woman is left confused. With a sideways glance, he states that the result of the magic wasn't as beautiful as it should be. From there, he remembers when he was a child and saw a mage for the first time on the street. In that moment, he was completely fascinated by the beauty of that magical power. Back in the present, the young man says that magic should be special, but that one was different. Right after, he kneels and points to the magic formula that is still on the ground. He explains that just like with the golem, the flow of mana in that formula was also strange. With that, he gets closer and asks what she thinks of his theory, leaving the mage completely flustered. Our protagonist clenches his fist and realizes that his desire wasn't just to become a mage. With his eyes sparkling, he reveals that he wants to create magic that is perfect and very beautiful. Isabel stares at him for a moment and says that if something is bothering him, he can simply rewrite it. The suggestion takes the young man completely by surprise, and he gets all excited about the idea. And so, he asks with a sparkle in his eyes how the heck you write a magic formula. The scene then shifts to Oscar's father walking down a corridor filled with pillars. Faced with the situation, the older man seems to be thinking about something with a very serious expression. Meanwhile, the apprentices who got their butts kicked complain about how the hero got so strong. Suddenly, Oscar's father appears, and the bully jumps out of his skin upon seeing his master there. Not knowing what to do, the guys try to play it cool and say that nothing much happened. But the older swordsman doesn't buy it and insists that they tell him the truth. Completely terrified, the two apprentices stammer, unable to answer properly. And so, one of them approaches the master and begins to explain the whole situation that went down. After hearing the whole story, the older man has a very surprised expression on his face. He finds it unbelievable that his son managed to defeat them, and the boys are embarrassed. The master then says he understands everything and dismisses them, telling them to take care for the next day. The two young men bow in respect and agree to the order as the hero's father watches them. Looking up at the sky, the older swordsman says to himself that the time has finally come. With a smile, he wonders if it's time to grant the sword aura to his son. The scene shifts to a huge library filled with books on every corner and shelf. Our protagonist comments that he didn't know magic formulas were so profound, and Isabel agrees. The mage says his fundamentals aren't bad and offers her books for him to study and learn more. With a smile, Isabel says that all the knowledge is there, and he can take whatever he wants. Suddenly, she turns around and realizes the young man has simply disappeared, leaving her quite confused. Right after, our protagonist appears with a stack of books and says he's going to take one more. The mage is shocked and asks if he's taking everything, and the young man confirms since she said so herself. Faced with the situation, she is left completely speechless by the young apprentice's audacity. But the hero changes the subject and says he needs to warn her about something very important. He explains that he is now a mage who harbors mana in his internal circuits and is no longer a warrior. As such, Isabel advises him to be very careful with the sword aura from now on. Meanwhile, the hero's father smiles maliciously, thinking about granting him the power of the sword, because if he tries to use both powers at the same time, he will most certainly meet his end.